Hi everyone. So I thought today I'd talk about the ENFP and see if we can explain that type correctly. One of the things which I've noticed, particularly amongst the those in the MBTI land who are a bit more connected up to groups like Personality Hacker, I've noticed almost a kind of swap over between ENFPs and ENFJs. It seems to me that, at least in MBTI land, ENFPs out of ENFs are the most sort of the more dramatic ones, and ENFJs are the more responsible ones. But as you'll quickly see, when we have a more thorough and more correct understanding of the various cognitive functions and how they all fit together, this doesn't hold water. Instead, we have already now explained correctly. Series described the ENFJ as being actually the more dramatic and more world influencing type. Meanwhile, the ENFP, being a type that values extroverted intuition, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, introverted sensing, is actually the more responsible one overall, kind of, depending on the particular kind or the particular ENFP you have in front of you. So, anyway, yes, so focus today is ENFP, the explorer. And explorers, I think, is a good word to describe them. They are a type that explores in all respects, without bound, without limitation, essentially. Um, their ego block, the part which they bring to the world, them in a nutshell, you could say, is extroverted intuition plus introverted feeling, which creates that sense of perspective exploration, of seeing um, possibilities through the relationships that they're able to forge and create. This is a type that also is very internal in its nature, doubly internal, you could say, um, while also being a type which values the internal. And what do I mean by that? I mean, this is a type that is most interested in the development of potential. This is a type which is very interested in, for instance, developing their own potential, becoming and flourishing in all the different and various ways in which they can flourish. So ENFP is pretty much on their journey. It's on a journey of self-discovery and self-development and growth. And this comes from the NENFI, the idea that they have this inner potential that they want to tap into. And there are many other ENFPs who are also interested in helping others tap into their potential. Lots of coaches are ENFPs, psychologists are ENFPs, but they don't have to be necessarily interested in unlocking other people's potential. But they are definitely interested in becoming the best of themselves. Um, so, yeah, NENFI is, when it's together, you can see this idea of benefit of the doubt giving, sort of a good faith judgment. This is a type which is who gets sort of optimistic about the nature of people and the potential that people can bring. They aren't a type which shuts off their communications with others. They're far more of a type which builds more of a network, and through the various interactions, they can unlock new possibilities. Anyway, let's go to the dominant function of this, which is the extroverted intuition. So, extroverted intuition for an ENFP is very much about possibilities um, of the potential within themselves, within other people. More, again, often themselves, but again, it can be of other people. Um, the idea for this is that the ENFP is motivated first and foremost by their curiosity, by that sense of potential, that sense of something. Maybe if they just sort of tap into this certain area, they can unlock something new. They can find some other way of viewing an issue. That's very, very important for an ENFP. And they tend to be a type which collects a very broad range of interests and takes interest in a broad diversity of people. This is a type which sees the world as being full of potential experiences for them to engage in. And so they're often the type which goes out on that exploration, on that journey of endless finding out and seeing what else the world has to offer. So that's the extroverted intuition for an ENFP. It makes us a type which is very interested in ideas and sharing ideas, in thinking about different ways in which they can improve as a person, in not feeling curtailed or restricted by certain set ways of thinking. This is a type who always finds some other route, some other path to travel through the world. They're very much free spirits, ENFPs. They are very hard to tie down as a result. They are natural travelers. They are natural journeymen through life because they want to essentially tap into all these different possibilities. And supporting extroverted intuition is the introverted feeling. So, introverted feeling, we've talked about this being very much tied to one-to-one personal relationships, but even deeper than that is the formation of personal attitudes. And ENFP is very much in touch with their personal attitudes. This is the type which, although motivated greatly by curiosity and taking interest in new people, new situations, new things, also has this sense of evaluating, how do I feel about this person? How do I feel about the situation? What of these different possibilities are actually valuable and meaningful personally to me? How do I, what is my personal relationship with this particular field, this particular topic, this particular individual in front of me? So they are very inclined to come up with subjective reasons for why they want to do what they do, which of the possibilities they want to be focusing on as their next project. And it also surfaces in this idea of developing themselves, that someone of good attitude is someone who would want to develop and grow over time. And the ENFP, rather like the INFJ, is a type which engages in sort of good faith judgment, who gets a sense of the individuals around them, their characters, their temperaments, and they'll be very good at sussing out the characters and temperaments of others. And they can have that same sort of disappointment in people who aren't quite meeting what they think is that inner potential in the individual. So they also have that ability to build up a sense of disappointment in others over time. It's less, it's often less apparent compared to the INFJ. The ENFP is far more frequently acquiring new contacts and talking to a number of different people. Usually still the one to one, but they get through quite a large number of people usually. And in that sort of what some have called a social butterfly, but an ENFP would rarely call themselves a social butterfly. They are being, they're still evaluating what's going on in front of them. And this is kind of why I'd say ENFPs don't describe themselves as social butterflies. They often describe themselves as introverted, because they have this sense of, oh yes, I'm interested in things. I'm interested in all these different possibilities. I'll go out and have lots of conversations and be able to draw together that person who I personally relate to. But in that, there's also a sort of soft judgment going on. And yeah, they aren't, certainly not groupie people. It's very much where they do have certain friends, they're very close one-to-one connections. They can essentially manage their relationships with lots of different people in lots of different situations without necessarily giving all of themselves to a particular group. It's very decentralized. It's very much the idea of a web of connections and contacts, that they can see the potential of one person, how it will be very interesting. That person were to meet that person, that could lead to that, and that could lead to that. ENFPs can often get great satisfaction be able to connect people up like this. But yeah, it is very much not simply remaining within the particular circle, but it's very much about tapping into the potential of people outside the circle and maybe perhaps bring someone else in from outside who can give things a new perspective. So ENFPs in general are just very interested in all of that. Okay, so now we move to the superego block. And the superego block, this is what is not valued. It is what is sort of imposed on ENFP by either society or just the world at large. And it's SE and TI, extroverted sensation, introverted thinking. So this is the area of sort of command, control, authority, logical certainty, the imposition of a truth onto reality. And that's kind of anathema to the ENFP. First of all, we have the role function, which ENFP can do to some degree, which is the extroverted sensation. So ENFPs aren't particularly aggressive folks. But unlike an INFJ, who's almost naive to the power play, an ENFP is aware when people are trying to get them to do things, but they're aware when there is a difference in power in a situation. They're going to have to fight for it. They're going to have to be assertive. They're going to have to actually be a bit more bossy with a group of people to actually get something done. Things like that. So yeah, the ENFP will have that assertive side, which will come out in short bursts or when it's demanded. It will always feel dirty to ENFP because they'll feel as if they are, when they're doing that, they are snuffing out potential possibilities, potential directions a conversation could go. And the ENFP is disinclined to sort of plan out how things are likely to go. So the idea that actually would impose on it is quite unnatural, but sometimes it's necessary, and the ENFP will have to do that on occasion, and so they will. They just won't feel very comfortable at doing it, and depending on the ENFP, they could be particularly averse to actually doing it, or if they're in a sort of an environment where part of their competence and their growth is actually asserting themselves, they may actually find themselves doing this quite a bit. I can think of examples where ENFPs have even end up in quite aggressive situations, such as George Orwell joining the revolutionary army against the fascists in Spain, things like that. Like they will they can engage in far more tough, direct, confrontational um, periods or activities, but this is always a stretch out of their natural preference to keep indirect, to keep exploratory, rather than simply focus on this thing as a thing to push forwards and to um, simply go for a concrete, tangible achievement over the development of their potential. So that's extroverted sensation. Now we have the vulnerable function, introverted thinking, and this really is where the ENFP struggles, because ENFPs, their blind spot is introverted thinking. They simply do not relate to the idea of there being an absolute logical, coherent truth for understanding things. The ENFP's natural state of being is to consider, well, what else is there? There could be another way of looking at this. It can't possibly be that simple. There must be more complexity, more nuance to be diving into. And ENFPs really are types which are interested in finding all the facts that actually undermine whatever structure is presented to them. They themselves um, will avoid drawing general rules on almost anything. It's often quite hard to get an ENFP to come at you with a very strong position on something, because almost anything to an ENFP will depend on the situation, and they don't want to take a particularly hard line here because that could then limit what else they can reach in another situation. They are a type that is very much into changing their mind with new facts and new experiences, new possibilities. And so they see introverted thinking, the idea of structure, idea of ideology, as a limitation on their potential growth. Um, they instead will use and abuse anything to do with a structure or a theory simply as a tool for their learning and growth and development. And I've seen ENFPs mix and match, say, socionics with MBTI, with Enneagram, with various different sorts. Because as far as they're concerned, it doesn't matter what is coherent and what's not. What matters is that they are finding things that, when go together, lead to practical effects which are beneficial, at least what they think will be beneficial, even if it doesn't actually make that coherent sense. So that's one of the issues of an ENFP. They are They have nothing to tie them to any set or structured set of ideas. They are very non-partisan in many things. It's very difficult to get an ENFP who belongs to a particular political party, you could say. Usually, if they rise up in the political arena, it's usually around a particular issue, and they'll be very much against the formalities of being in power, of being in authority. They'll chafe at that idea. They are far more inclined to the more informal, personal conversation with each individual. They don't see why there needs to be certain rules and structures around how you act, how you say this to that person that particular way. They simply do not think bureaucratically. And any attempt to get them to adhere to some kind of structure in any respect, they will deviate from that. I've known ENFPs who are meant to follow a script in an interview, and they don't. They go their own way. They find something else to do. They simply will not work down the tram lines. They'll always find their way off the tram lines and in some other direction. So yeah, introverted thinking is very much that blind spot for an ENFP. And if you look at, say, the work of Steven Pinker, very smart ENFP. Even he won't give you generalized descriptions of things. He'll give you lots of examples because ENFPs can only really think in terms of the decentralized situations as opposed to some sort of rule which lies underneath all the situations. They kind of refuse to cognitively accept those sorts of things. All right. Now let's go to the super id block, which is what is valued but weak. So SI and TE together, this is the realm of practicality in the day-to-day. Doing a good job. It's about that earnest working life, working with your hands, improving processes to make them work as effectively as possible, conserving your resources, all these sorts of things. So ENFPs are very attracted to this area, but they don't have the same competence in this area which they have in their ego block. So first of all, we have the suggestive function, which is the weakest but valued function. So introverted sensation for an ENFP shows up in them being these sorts of explorers, these people who go out and seek out new experiences, new ideas, who are the sort of quite creative and ideas oriented free spirits who won't be tied down to any set way of thinking about any one thing. And in that leads to quite a messy life at a time. These are not types who naturally maintain and sustain, and that can have an effect on their mental and emotional health to some degree when they find themselves in a house which is run down, which is not well looked after, where the environment has a certain chaos and noise and to it. What ENFP needs is someone who can maintain and bring that space back to some sort of semblance of harmony and order. They need someone who can not create logical certainty, which the ENFP is almost allergic to. No, someone who brings stability to their physical surroundings, who makes things, makes experiences peaceful rather than simply a sort of a hectic, ongoing exploration without savoring what has actually been discovered. So ENFP needs that sort of grounding, that calm rock in their life. Lots of ENFPs can be quite neurotic. They can jump from one view to another and sort of lack that kind of stability. So they benefit greatly from someone who's be that sort of calm, supportive figure in their lives. So yeah, that's the introverted sensation for an ENFP. Now, the part which is more well developed, what can be more well developed, is extroverted thinking in the mobilizing function. It's still weak, but they've grown it over time. And the idea is that the ENFP, where an ENFP can get almost quite annoying, really, because they're usually very, very good with people. They might not take people so seriously because it's kind of a soft, more flexible area for them. But they are very good with people, to be very likable. What they're not so good at doing, but they really take very seriously, is their thinking, is their competence, is their capability. How have they managed to move forward and get things to work? How have they managed to solve all the problems? How have they managed to develop new skills and practice them? So they have increased their competence and their offering. Um, this is what an ENFP finds very, very important, and can get a bit sort of well, I've seen it get also over the top, where you have these sort of very commercialized ENFPs who sort of, they don't mean necessarily because they're blind spots into it, they don't even know the reason for why things ought to be the way they ought to be, but they'll be chopping and changing to try to make it commercial. And if you try to get them to go in sort of the what is it under the surface, they may find no, let's not make it too complicated. Let's see what we can actually use and apply in this situation. And so they can get quite sort of forward, even quite pushy about making things commercial without necessarily understanding the reasons why the things they're using work the way that they work. So that could be a problem for an ENFP. They can be quite sort of they can latch onto certain bodies of knowledge and develop this view that they now know how things work, and they take delight in being able to tell people how things are, to share and impart useful information. ENFPs, when they got their extroverted thinking developed, they was in a confident part of that cycle. They will can find themselves going around giving advice, trying to help you to do things in a more effective or a more sort of satisfying way. They really like the idea of acquiring new skills and practicing new techniques. These are the types who you may find on, say, a meetup.com, you through the extrovert intuition, popping in on various courses, various clubs, and they're not quite sticking to any because it's very hard to tie them down to anything. Again, they're very non-committal, but they will be looking and acquiring skills. And this is also the thing, right? ENFPs are types who engage very much with people, but they'll very much do this through the lens of how can I make use of this? How can I acquire this thing to improve my capabilities? What am I learning from this? How am I improving from this? That is very much ongoing with the ENFP. And similarly, there's this extroverted thinking becomes a sense of, oh, nothing is absolutely true. It's always in the nuances and the facts. When the ENFPs explain things, they won't say give you general rules. They'll give you example after example after example after example after example. It can be frustrating to introverted thinking types when they do this because it means they're not seeing the general rule. But for ENFP, what they see are the many, many instances of things. And they'll try to understand things in all their complex nuance through the various instances. They will object to a generalized category. And extroverted thinking is the means by which they go out and collect that knowledge. They collect that highly situation based thinking to fuel their competence and capability. And unlike an INFJ, an ENFP is not a type that will want you to do things for them. They're going to be ones who are going to take delight in being able to be presented with some sort of problem and find some sort of solution for that problem, because that is proving to themselves, yes, I can do this myself. I am capable and competent. And I've seen ENFPs get quite protective over what they're doing and almost avoiding any kind of help because they really want to feel that they are doing this, that they are the competent one, and they'll feel less competent if someone else is doing it. So that's kind of can be a bit of a chip on the shoulder of some ENFPs regarding their extroverted thinking. Okay, and finally we get to the id block, which is not valued but is strong. So NIFE, the idea of image creation, of being able to create messages that are influential in the long term, that are able to bring a sense of profundity to people's emotional states, this sort of thing. An ENFP doesn't really care for, but they can engage in very effectively should they want to. First, we have the ignoring function, which is introvert intuition. the ENFP has very little to do with introvert intuition. They can see which possibilities have weight, which ones have relevance, which ones are going or heading toward places, and which ones are less likely to be doing so. But an ENFP is not a type that wants to be tied down to a particular vision or fate or destiny. They reject this. They are naturally the free spirits. They're naturally the sort of person who wants to feel unbound by any kind of preconceived notions or structures or concepts for how things are meant to be. They want to go and live a life outside of these boundaries and set ways of doing things. And it's interesting because on the one hand, I could say ENFP is actually can actually be more responsible to what they look like ENFJs. Well, the MBTI ENFJ, I should say, because that's the extroverted thinking. That's them trying to be as competent and capable. And so they do end up actually working quite hard, and they do end up planning and organizing things quite effectively. That is actually that's the development of extroverted thinking, becoming a competent manager of things. But what an ENFP is not going to do is spend too much time indulging on the overall purpose of where things are going, what this is all for, what is relevant, what is not. An ENFP will instead say, "Oh, you can find other relevant things all over the place. You just have to look. You just have to listen. You just have to open your mind and be curious to what the world is bringing." So, yeah, they avoid those kinds of limitations. They often will take a chance with different people, give people the benefit of the doubt rather than shut people off immediately, because for them it's about um, seeing what potential comes out, even if they can have quite a strong feeling in terms of what someone might actually be like. They'll still give people the benefit of the doubt. The extrovert intuition does that quite a lot. Um, but yes, um, introvert intuition, therefore, is something which is sort of kept locked in a box for an ENFP and only really let out to help them um, pick out from the various possibilities which ones are likely to actually bring some potential. Okay. And finally, we have extroverted feeling, which is a demonstrative function for the ENFP. And this is often in use quite a bit. It's less obvious for men, I find, than women. The men actually can be quite sort of unexpressive for a type which I think would be extrovert and feelings. It must be very expressive, but no, sometimes I've found the men actually very much not, because they have grown from extroverted feeling to extroverted thinking, become far more matter of fact in how things work. Nevertheless, I've seen ENFPs be a type that, especially when they meet you first and they're not on this as a strong ground, they will lean into extroverted feeling, and they can be very charismatic, very likable people. They don't have a sort of dramatic presence to them. It's not about making you feel very strong emotions, but they have a sort of light-hearted charm to them that people find very refreshing to be around. And ENFPs are very good at navigating different social circles because they have introverted feeling being the main reason why they do things, which is well, not main reason, being the valued thing in how they approach people. So causing them to investigate and explore the individual perspectives and character of the people around them. But they also have extroverted feelings supporting that in helping them to make those good first impressions. An example. So I take Stephen Pink, I take Jonathan Haidt as two examples of very sort of brainy ENFPs, very developed in their extroverted thinking, um, who nevertheless are people able to say some ideas which are perhaps a bit more conservative in the modern day understanding, um, who nevertheless remain very popular and very much uncriticized figures by and large, because they have that very strong extroverted ethics ability to find the way of saying something in a way which is as uninsulting to those people as possible. They can pitch things in the right kind of way so it comes across well. Now, ENFPs have no real desire to be up influencing people, being the central figure which everyone pays attention to. That's not really what it's about. They just have a gift in being able to manage moods and emotions, how people are feeling, but they do not actually like to use this in a sort of concerted way. It's more a means of getting by socially, of allowing them, therefore, to actually pick out those more particular individuals they find they feel especially close to, they feel they have a special connection with, and leading an very much unbound, unlimited life, essentially, where they can develop their full potential. Anyway, I hope that was helpful to people in the ENFP. If you have any questions about the ENFP or any other type, please feel free to email worldsocionics@hotmail.com. I have a course which is out at the moment. It is on a discount for August, especially. So if you want to get 50% off the course, please email me this month. And yeah, you can make that purchase for only £300 as opposed to £600. Could be a very good deal if you'd like to learn more about socionics. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day, everyone, and bye-bye.